Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. Joining me today, it's Pato and McCubs. Welcome aboard, gents. And we are talking about at Mine Kicknart's question, who was asked, with the Bundesliga coming back this weekend, who are the most exciting young talents that we should look out for? But before we get involved with that question, just a quick reminder to subscribe to Euro Football Daily and hit that notification bell to never miss a Continental Club. But it's back. After 9 weeks, football has finally returned with the Bundesliga, and we've got some big matches, which we will cover in Big Match Preview for the first time even in about 2 months. But we wanted to focus on the main talents involved. We obviously could have mentioned a lot about Jayden Sancho, Timo Werner, but we also wanted to bring some sort of less heralded names to the table. So, well, let's kick off, Pat, with a player at Bayer Leverkusen who's been getting a lot of attention for quite a while now in Kai Havertz.
Yeah, well, I mean, Leverkusen are not really in the title hunt. At the same time, only 8 points separate fifth from first. But I really think that Leverkusen's role in the last few games of the season is probably going to be as a spoiler. They've got Bayern coming to visit them, and that could be a potentially title-deciding game, because Bayern have a horrible record away at Bayer Leverkusen. And right now, Havertz is really the centre of that Leverkusen side. Obviously, there's been loads of transfer rumours about him because he's 20 years old, contributed, I think it was 20 league goals last season, goals and assists, scored 17, assisted 3. And to be honest, last season, I had my question marks about him because he did overperform expected goals. People kept talking about him as a number 10, but when I looked at his creative numbers, I think he was creating one chance a game. He was taking a decent number of shots, but he wasn't dribbling that much. And I kind of was like, okay, obviously this guy's talented. He's 19 and he's starting in a proper league for a big club. But I want to see a little bit more from him. And this season, I have. I mean, this season he hasn't been involved in as many goals. He's got 11 goal contributions in 22 Bundesliga games. But his expected goals have risen really quite sharply from 0.45 a game to 0.6. Which is a really big leap. To be producing that as a young player is excellent, even when you have the advantage of playing in a system like Peter Bosz's. I think last time I looked, I think Leverkusen had like 6 or 7 players who had over 0.4 expected goals and assists per game, which is like more than Liverpool. They're just an attacking machine. Like, everybody gets big numbers. But Havertz this season, his shot numbers have gone down from about 3 to about 2. But his creative numbers have shot up from 1.1 to I think about 2.4. He's dribbling more as well. Physically, he's a real presence too. He's a pretty big guy. And he's played in almost every position. He's played off the wing. He's played as a second forward. He's played in the number 10 role, obviously. He's played in midfield 3. And so it's quite easy to envision where he could fit in a different sort of side. And I think that's probably why he's been linked to so many different teams. I mean, Bayern, Barcelona and Real Madrid are obviously heavily interested. Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool. He'd kind of make sense for all of them, really, apart from maybe Man United. And I think that the good thing from Leverkusen's point of view is they're going to get at least another year of him. Like, their sporting director, Rolfers, who actually used to play for them a few years ago, he said recently that, it's logical that Havertz would move on at some point. But given that they're going to want close to 9 figures, you imagine, I think that nobody's going to have that money for at least another year, maybe even 2. Like, who knows? It's possible that, there's a big explosion in revenue next season as everybody goes back to watching games. But it looks like games will be played behind closed doors for certainly the rest of this season and probably a portion of next season. And so I don't know if anybody will have that money in the near future. But anyway, Havertz is really, really good on the ball. He extremely rarely loses it, given how creative he is. He's got a pass accuracy of like 87%. He's got kind of Mesut Ozil numbers right now, but with more of a track record of scoring goals. So I'm intrigued to see what he turns into. And I think that Leverkusen won't mind both getting another year and probably getting an extra 20-30 mil on top of the transfer fee they'd currently get for him when he takes even another step forward next year.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with you. I think he would fit into a lot of systems. I think he'd be a great replacement for Mesut Ozil, long-term Arsenal. But actually, if Chelsea hadn't signed Hakim Ziyech, I could really see him working well there as well. I think Mason Mount still has quite a long way to go to be a complete footballer, although I have been impressed with elements of his game this year, but he'd be such a good option just because of his versatility in that Chelsea side. I think that would have been really exciting. McCubs, let's talk about someone sort of less heralded in Milot Rashica, who has sort of burst onto the scene in that way. He's been playing for a couple of years, but really come to the fore this year in terms of the attention he's getting worldwide.
Yeah. Firstly, apologies. The bin men are outside, so there might be a little bit of background noise in that sense. But yeah, Milot Rashica went to Werder Bremen back in January 2018. He'd been at Vitesse for about 2.5 seasons before that. Had been very good at Vitesse. I think he actually played with Mason Mount for about half a season in 2017-18. And I think Mason Mount essentially kind of ended up kind of replacing his kind of goal and assist output that season after he left. And yeah, a little bit like Kai Havertz, very versatile forward, can play kind of in a 10 role, can play even as a centre forward, but mainly plays as a left winger. I think that's kind of, mainly due to his dribbling ability. But this season, he's basically just kind of carried the side, to be honest. Last term, he actually had a much better expected goals and assists, and he was contributing at a far greater rate. I think he was getting a goal or an assist every 111 minutes, which for a 22-year-old in a fairly average side is excellent, really. He had 5 goals and 9 assists in I think 19 starts. This season it's 7 goals and 4 assists in 20 starts, so it has gone down a little bit, and his XG in assists has gone down by something like 0.2. So it is a decent drop off, but Werder Bremen have just been so bad this year that it's totally understandable. They basically didn't replace Max Kruse, who was so essential to their whole attacking system last year. He led them for goals and assists. And I think that the only striker they got in last summer was Fulbrook from Hanover, who had a decent season a couple of years ago, but last season wasn't really up to much, didn't really have much game time, and he's struggled to integrate. So yeah, Rashica has pretty much been tasked with running that entire attack. And clearly he can't work wonders in that sense. But he has still been really impressive. He made a few headlines in December because Bayern ended up beating them 6-1 in this game, but he kind of kicked off the game with an amazing solo goal, which actually put Werder Bremen 1-0 up. So he's definitely got that star quality. He's got that kind of, he's definitely got that, what would you say, that kind of attitude towards like big games and stuff, which I think is one of the reasons why Liverpool have been interested in him. RB Leipzig have been interested in him as well. Apparently, they kind of see him maybe as an option should they sell Timo Werner. I don't think he's not in the Timo Werner mold, I wouldn't say, but he definitely would make up something there. And I think the reports last month at least were suggesting that Leipzig were considering paying his release clause this summer, which is 38 million euros, and I think that would only come in second as like the biggest domestic transfer in German football history. I think Julian Draxler going to Schalke, I believe, or was it from Schalke to Wolfsburg? I can't remember.
To Wolfsburg.
Yeah, to Wolfsburg.
Yeah, I think that's the top with at like 42 million euros or something.
I thought his release clause was going to drop this summer. There were rumours that his release clause was going to halve this summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know how confirmed it is because it's always release clause stuff, but yeah, I did read something that said his release clause potentially was going to drop to like 19 million euros this summer.
Oh, really? That might be the case. I'd heard it was at that this summer. Maybe it drops after this summer.
Oh yeah,
I'm not
maybe.
Sure, but either way, Leipzig were quite quick to kind of quash those rumours, but they still remain interested. So I don't know, and obviously in the market, whenever the transfer window reopens, the market is going to look very different from what a lot of the kind of transfer rumours have been kind of saying, essentially. So yeah, but either way, I mean, Werder Bremen are ranked bottom of the league for expected goals this year. So yeah, he has been pretty much doing all the work. They're 8 points off safety, although they're 4 points off the relegation playoff. So with 10 games to go for Werder Bremen, they could still claw out. I think their first game is actually against Bayer Leverkusen, so not an easy place to start. But yeah, I mean, yeah, barring a miracle, essentially, Rashica is definitely going to be on the market if Werder Bremen go down, or even if they don't go down. So yeah, I'd expect it to see him at a much better outfit next season. So yeah, so I guess this kind of 9-10 game period now is going to be a good opportunity for him to really show kind of potential suitors what he's made of.
Yeah, you make a good point, actually. I mean, the eyes of the world is, firmly fixed on Germany for the next month at least, while the other leagues come back into it. So he's got a great opportunity. In the brief amount that I've watched him, I can't say I've watched a lot of Werder Bremen this year, he's just so quick. He's so deceptively quick and very good in tight spaces as well. It'll be interesting to see how he would adapt to a system where he's not their main one of their main creative outlets as well. So we shall see. But, you mentioned Leipzig a lot there, and obviously we're going to talk about Timo Werner, but actually there's a lot of defensive talent that would be worth looking at for any club this summer. Mukiele, obviously. Konate's been injured a lot, but, looked very promising, particularly last year, still only 20. Angelino has picked up a bit of form after struggling in the first half of the season at Man City. But the man that everyone's sort of chasing this summer, probably the top centre-back target for most teams in the world, is Dayot Upamecano. It's been the sort of standout player in that defence, which is the joint best in Germany. I think they've only conceded 26 goals in 25 games, which isn't a fantastic record. You'd expect one side to be under a goal a game, but it's still the best in Germany. I think it's the 10th best in Europe. And he's bounced back from a really torrid 18-19 season where he missed 23 games with a variety of injuries, couldn't really get fit at all. But he's been pretty much ever-present this year, so put all those injury doubts behind him. He's 6th for minutes in Nagelsmann's squad, and has just proved himself once again to be one of the most exciting, centre-back talents in world football. 3.9 tackles and interceptions, which is pretty high, but then you probably consider that, Leipzig with a high pressing side, he's often left sort of quite high up the pitch with a fairly high line, and his pace and power really comes in for covering the other members of that defensive line as well. But the really great thing about him, I think, is his passing range and his passing ability. He's on 73 passes per game, which is phenomenal, with an 89% pass accuracy. And his ability with his left foot to thread long, short, into midfield. Conrad Lamer has really prospered off his passing this year, in particular from the back. And he's pretty solid in the air as well, 65% aerial dual win rate. And the best thing about the possibility of signing Upamecano this summer is that his contract expires in 2021. I am a bit sceptical that anyone will be able to get him, just because I'm more confident of Timo Werner leaving than Upamecano, and I wouldn't have thought Leipzig would be up for selling both in the same summer. But then with the prospect of him leaving for free next summer, maybe they'll have to. But his agent, Volker Struth, told Sport 1, the German outlet, that he can't see it happening because it would take a monster bid, even with this contract situation, which he can't see happening this summer with the current climate. So that'll potentially, it's potentially one to watch. But his main areas you'd expect are Arsenal, who had a £55 million bid supposedly turned down last summer, Spurs, who retain a big interest, and Man City, which seems like the most logical fit. I mean, Pat, with your head rather than your heart, do you see any opportunity for Arsenal to land Upamecano this summer?
I think if anyone has the money this summer, they've got a shot. Given that his contract does run out next year, I think that probably he'd be quite intrigued by almost any offer. And I think he was interested last summer. Don't get me wrong, I think he'd choose a lot of clubs over Arsenal. But I think a lot of those teams are just not going to put their money in their hand in their pocket this year. So if they are able to go back in and make a bid that Leipzig can accept, yeah, I think they've got a decent shot. I think we quite often underrate teams' chances of getting players. We say, oh well, such and such a player will want Champions League football, or they won't really want to go there when they could go elsewhere. But I really think that actually players are often quite keen to just move on and get more money. because they understand it's a short career. And Upamecano has already had a series of kind of long-lasting injuries in his very short career. So, I think they've got a decent shot, but I'm not sure they have the cash. So I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this he just decides to wait out a year and then leave for free. I don't think that would be the worst case scenario for him, really.
Fair. Arsenal fans jumping for joy all around the world hearing Pat say that it could be on. McCubs, let's talk about a potential deal for United. Obviously, we didn't want to talk about him in too great a detail, but Jayden Sancho, I mean, how excited are you about the prospect of that move potentially happening?
Yeah, it would be amazing, obviously. I feel like the talk around it's kind of died down in the last few weeks, unless I've just kind of sounded it out. But yeah, it would be an amazing deal. Like we've been saying, it's so difficult to envisage what the transfer market's going to look like this summer. And the one thing that I think could get in the way of it is that it's looking increasingly likely that Paul Pogba is going to stay at United this summer, and I think that's probably going to play quite big. That's near 100 million euros or 100 million quid that United aren't going to have to play with in the transfer market. And I kind of welcome it, to be fair. Like, I think it will hopefully be a positive thing, Pogba staying at United, barring Real Madrid suddenly coming out of nowhere with a huge bid. But yeah, I mean, Jayden Sancho is a player that United would otherwise need. The right flank has been a problem position for so many years now, coming on half a decade, to be honest. So, and Jayden Sancho is the best young player in that position, if not, one of the best players in that position in the world. So yeah, it would be really exciting. But I'm not particularly getting my hopes up at this stage. I feel like my gut instinct is that Sancho might even just stay at Borussia this summer, and then maybe go for the kind of money that they're really expecting in 2021. That kind of 150 mil plus kind of price tag, which I expect will be will probably be the kind of area where Haaland's going to be getting up to as well.
Yeah, for sure. And they've got plenty of time, Dortmund, in that he's only 20. He doesn't, his contract's not running out. They sort of hold all the cards. Two others that we have to mention. Well, we have to mention one of them, Timo Werner. Absolutely phenomenal year. 25 Bundesliga games, 21 goals, 7 assists, 6 goal contributions in 8 Champions League games, which has been the thing that I've almost been most impressed with, because he didn't have that much Champions League experience prior to this year, at least going far in the competition, which it looks like Leipzig have a very good opportunity to do. Because when the Champions League comes back, Leipzig and Bayern might have played 5-6 games compared to the rest of Europe, although we don't know whether the Champions League is going to actually be played after all the leagues are finished. So there's still a lot of uncertainty there. But yeah, insane shot numbers, very creative, can play on the left, and centrally, everyone knows about Timo Werner. What an exciting prospect. But I'm almost sort of been more surprised by his teammate this year in Conrad Lamer, 22-year-old central midfielder, signed from RB Salzburg a couple of years ago. 30 league and Champions League appearances, a couple of goals, a couple of assists, but it's his defensive output that's just insane. He's over 5 tackles and interceptions, which goes to close to it's over 5 tackles alone per 90 in the Champions League this season. And everyone saw in those 2 games against Spurs just how sort of devastating he can be as a sort of midfield destroyer. But that sort of underplays his dribbling ability. He's over a dribble a game. He's close to 2. His pass accuracy is only about 80%, but I think that's often because he's used to sort of direct some quite quick counter-attack long balls to Timo Werner and Yusuf Poulsen and Nkunku, because Nagelsmann's never afraid about going back to front reasonably quickly on the counter-attack. So that could be a factor as well. Pat, one final name that I wanted to shove in there is Breland Bolo, because he's slightly gone under the radar at Gladbach this year, with Alisson Play and Marcus Thuram getting so much credit, but he's had a pretty good campaign.
Yeah, I mean, obviously getting him off Schalke seemed like a bit of a steal in the summer, but he did have his injury problems in the past, and he's been great. I think he's got 10 goal involvements so far this season. I mean, he is not a top-level talent anymore, I don't think, in the way that Marcus Thuram is. Like, if you had to bet on one of those, I think you'd go for Thuram. But everything is very solid. Like over 2.5 shots a game, nearly 3 dribbles, a little bit of creativity as well. His expected goals and assist numbers are absolutely frightening. Like I think he's over 0.8, which is like Raheem Sterling level. If he can sustain it next season and stay fit, then maybe we'll start talking about Bremen Bolo as a real kind of top prospect again, which would be nice to see. Unfortunately for Gladbach, they're probably in a position where somebody might come in for one of their players, but they're not going to have to sell all of them. So, like, potentially, if they have to sell Thuram in the next couple of years, they'll be able to keep Mbolo or the other way around. I think that he has been really... It's been really nice to see him kind of produce the sort of form that got him his move to Germany from Basel in the first place. And he's still extremely quick. He can clearly play a variety of roles. Playing under Marco Reus right now is probably the best case for him, really.
Yeah, that's where you want to be. I remember doing a How to Fix Schalke podcast in last year, halfway through, and I was like, you need to get Bremen Bolo more minutes because he looked devastating in the minutes he played for Schalke. But what a move it's turned out to be. Obviously, guys, we couldn't mention everyone, but Patrick Schick, Goretzka, Leon Bailey's a very exciting talent that hasn't had the best of times this year. Marcus Thuram, as Pat mentioned, and Moussa Diaby's had a good campaign at Bayer Leverkusen as well. So
he's been outrageous. Moussa Diaby's been outrageous, man.
Yeah, he's so exciting. So there's plenty of talent to get stuck into this weekend and for the rest of the season in the Bundesliga. But yeah, let's move on to our big match preview. Despite the fact that Frankfurt are playing Gladbach this weekend and Leipzig are playing high-flying Freiburg, we only have one game we could talk about in the Bundesliga this weekend. It takes place on Saturday, I should say, at 2:30. It's the Ruhr Derby. It's Dortmund versus Schalke, second versus sixth. Very exciting. McCubs, no one really knows what sort of state the two sides will be in, but Dortmund did go into the enforced break in pretty good form.
Yeah, they did. Pretty much the form team in the country. Obviously, they were down in fourth when they went into the winter break, but since then went on a run of 7 wins in 8 Bundesliga games, and their only loss was that 4-3 away at Leverkusen, which is obviously a very entertaining game. And they still scored 3, so it just goes to show how much they've kind of blossomed on the attacking end as the season's gone on. So obviously they're now in second. They're 4 points off Bayern Munich. During that run, they were scoring 3.3 goals a game. That's like Man City kind of level, isn't it? That was 26 goals in that time, only conceded 9 in that time as well, so they weren't giving up too much on the defensive end. Obviously they do tend to give up a little bit from their back line, which isn't always the best. Obviously they don't have the best keeper in the world either, but obviously the form of Sancho and Haaland and Torgan Hazard seems to have kind of pulled them through, and it just looked like a really just looks such a dangerous side right now, at least before the break. Obviously, we don't really know what kind of state teams are going to be in terms of how fitness and whatnot. And I mean, even Sancho is a doubt for this game, which is a little bit of a worry considering how much time players have had to recoup. But yeah, I mean, he had 10 goals and 11 goals and 10 assists in his last 14 Bundesliga games, which just goes to show how big an impact he's had. Just ridiculous, really, isn't it? And yeah, even without Sancho, obviously, Dortmund still have, a lot of options. Obviously, Haaland's 9 goals in his last 8 games in all competitions. Hazard, like we were saying, has been excellent. Goetze, who's obviously coming to the end of his contract, will be looking to have a good final 10 games or whatever it is. He's creating more than 2 chances a game, as is Reina, as is Dahoud. So so they've still got, even without Sancho, they've got enough to overcome Schalke this weekend, I think. And it would be a massive boost if they can come away with this with a convincing win, because obviously they don't really have anything else to focus on. The DFB Pokal, I'm not sure whether when that's getting started, but they're out of that now, so they really do just have the Bundesliga to focus on. But like I said, I'm not really sure where other competitions are at, to be honest. So at this moment in time, I think everyone's just focusing on the Bundesliga and just kind of focusing on these games going ahead safely, to be honest. But in terms of the title race, I think Dortmund have, they've got a pretty good they got a pretty good chance.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, as you say, with 9 games in their season left, Bayern could play as much as 17, could be a factor in it, although, as you say, we don't know when the rest of those games for Bayern are going to be played. Pat, let's talk about their opponents this weekend, Schalke, which McCubbin has quite correctly pointed out that they haven't been the most thrilling side, and go into this in awful form, although with the break, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first kind of third of the season, they were pretty good. I think they'd won 8 going into Christmas, so that took them up to 4th. Since then, they've slipped to 6th, but it's kind of amazing they're even that high, given I think they've got 1 win in 10 since December, which is absolutely horrible. They haven't been helped by a couple of batterings in there. They lost 5-0 to Bayern, they lost 5-0 to Leipzig, they lost 3-0 to Cologne. But I don't know. I think they're just lucky to be where they are, to be honest. Like David Wagner's got quite a lot of credit for not really doing that much, I think. Like they're 11th for goals scored, they're 8th for goals conceded. They're not even really a particularly solid defensive side. To me, the main threat here is that for some reason they always just manage to raise their game against Dortmund, because it's a derby. But they've only scored 2 goals in their last 7 games. So Schalke fans have got to be hoping that this time off has rejuvenated their team, because this season they've been so reliant on 1 or 2 people. Suat Serdar's got 7 goals. Amin Havertz has been involved in 10. But those guys are really the goal threat. And I suppose the other thing that they do have on their side is that going forward, they're a pretty young team. Of their 20 most used players this season, only 3 are over 30. I think their average age is like 25, which is not too young for the Bundesliga. But it suggests that, they'll be able to kind of grow and develop. On the other hand, I think they're going to need to add some serious pieces if they want to get back to a competitive level. I'm not sure where this game is. Where did you say it was?
It's at Dortmund.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest, I go into every Dortmund Schalke game thinking like this is a guaranteed Dortmund win. And like I said, for some reason, Schalke just managed to pull something out of the bag. So they'll probably be better than I expect, but I still think they'll lose.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. I mean, Schalke have a really good recent record in this fixture. In their last 8 games in all competitions, Schalke have won 2, Dortmund have won 1, and there's been 5 draws. And the return fixture in late October was a 0-0 draw. But this is really going to be sort of a walking wounded fest. I mean, the amount of injuries is a bit of a joke. So get this. So Dortmund, Zagadou and Marco Reus are definitely out. Sancho is unlikely to be fit, as McCubbin says, and neither is Emre Can. Emre Can's a big loss as well. He had a nice little partnership going with Axel Witsel in the middle of the park before the break, and it means Delaney's going to feature in his first game since November, so that's a bit of a risk. Hakimi, Akanji, Götze and Schmelzer are also struggling. For Schalke, club captain Oscar Mascarell is out, so too Stambouli and Kabak. So it's going to be interesting to see how the players perform in an empty stadium with a lot of their key men missing in a derby. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. I mean, if you had to put a scoreline to it, what do you reckon?
I'm going to say 2. I'll say 2-1 Dortmund.
Fair, Pat.
Actually, no. I'm going to say bigger. I'm going to say like 4-3 because I think it's going to be so. I don't know. Like it could be like a defensive nightmare. Like it could just be like a defensive and tactical nightmare after this break.
For sure. Pat?
God, those are big injuries for Dortmund. Like if Hakimi's out as well and they're missing Akanji and Zagadou, like that's a concern. I'm gonna go 2-1 just because I think I actually don't think people will be, I don't know, quite at the races. I think they'll be a little bit rusty. So I'm gonna go 2-1
for sure. I think 90 minutes will seem like a hell of a long game for these players when they haven't really done any fitness, or at least this type of fitness for quite a while. I'm going to go 1-0 Dortmund. I know I normally bring the goals, but I just don't back it this time. But guys, get your score predictions in the comments down below, and let's move on to our quickfire question. Our quickfire question comes in from Puig SZNI, and he says, which Bundesliga team should the neutrals support? McCubbs, which one are you going to be rooting for?
Well, I did that little thing that Football Daily put on Twitter, where you it chooses your team for you, and I actually ended up getting Werder Bremen, which is why I'm rooting for Rashica so much. So yeah, I guess I could pitch them in some ways. They're a historic club, one of the most successful clubs in German history, and they look like they're going to go down. They're 8 points off safety, with 10 games to go, and they haven't been relegated since 1980. So if there's a team to really get behind, and maybe a fairy tale ending awaits, go for Werder Bremen. I'd say, it could be incredibly painful, but there's a small chance that maybe there will be a great escape. So yeah,
they've also got is it Josh Sargent as well, the ginger US guy who always makes me laugh. That he just seems so out of place in terms of. Yeah. But anyway, he's doing all right there. Pat, who are you rooting for in the Bundesliga?
I got RB Leipzig on that.
Did you?
Which team should you support thing? But and I'd root for them over Bayern, but I'd probably say Leverkusen.
Nice.
Like I think Leverkusen have just got so many players who are individually fun to watch. Like I think Haaland, Havertz, Bailey.
Diaby.
Obviously Moussa Diaby. Like Moussa Diaby has got insane expected goals and assist numbers, and I think is completing like 4.5 dribbles a game or something, and he's 20. He's been nuts this season. So I just think like they also are a little bit. They're just a little bit kind of naive in the way they play. They're really, really attacking and kind of silly, and I enjoy that. Like they'll batter teams relentlessly, and you're unlikely to see a dull game featuring Leverkusen unless they get totally shut down by a defensive opponent, because they're going to give up chances. I'd say Leverkusen are going to be pretty fun down the stretch.
Nice, fair enough. I got Wolfsburg, which I was quite pleased about. They're doing all right. I don't really know that many of their players, though. I mean, they got Wout Weghorst, who Joe Tomlinson, has made perfectly clear that he is 6'6". That's about one of their only selling points. They've also got this guy called Joseph Brekalo, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, who's a winger, who's quite exciting. But I'm kind of pissed off with him because I tried to sign him on Football Manager for Inter Milan. This was in 2 years' time, and he was really coming good in the Bundesliga. They wanted 45 million for him. I offered 49, but he rejected me and then signed for Bayern for less money. So I'm kind of annoyed.
What dick?
I'm kind of annoyed with him, and I'm going to take it into real life. But I have now given up on Football Manager. I have got my life back. You'll be pleased to know. But yeah, that's who we are supporting in the Bundesliga. Let us know who you guys are rooting for in the comments down below, and let us know what you guys thought about the episode in the comments down below as well. Pat, what should the people go and do now?
They should watch the podcast that went out earlier this week, which was a bit of a roundup of everything happening in the football world at the moment, which included the return of the Bundesliga. So we also talk a little bit about it there and some of the bigger transfers this summer. Jorginho to Juventus among them. Obviously, hit me up as well on Twitter with any suggestions you have for podcast episodes, because believe it or not, the well is dry. There's nothing to talk about right now. So please, if you have a genius idea for a podcast, one that could be done ideally with very little research, then that would be extremely helpful.
Fair. I've actually just had a notification on my phone, as Pat was saying about that podcast, that Juventus and Chelsea have supposedly entered talks to swap Pjanic with Jorginho, according to The Guardian, which is quite rogue. Wow. But let's see how that plays out. Cubs, what should anyone else do?
Well, everything you need to know is obviously our new series on Football Daily. If you haven't checked that out, do so. This week it's a bit of a meaty one. It's Manchester City and their attempt to buy Messi, which you wrote, I believe.
I did, yeah.
Right? Very, very good script. I think I voiced it, and a very good edit from Danny. So yeah, go and check that out, and go and check out that series in general. Go and show that some love, because yeah, it's good.
Yeah, those videos are genuinely excellent. And I'm really enjoying McCubs, your smooth voiceovers on them as well. It just makes it, the story just come together. But guys, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.